For nearly half a century, Voyager 1 has drifted in the darkness, a fragment of Earth cast into eternity. Launched in 1977, it carried the best of us. The sounds of rain, a mother's voice, bark, greetings in 55 languages, and a golden record inscribed with our location among the stars. It was our message in a bottle, sailing endlessly into the cosmic sea with no expectation of reply. And yet, in 2025, it was heard. When 3CATLAS, the interstellar object that defied every known law of physics, entered the solar system, a quiet order came down from NASA headquarters. Most of the world was focused on the James Webb data, on the strange metallic reflections, on the idea that this was not a comet, but something else. But behind closed doors, a smaller team at the Deep Space Network received a directive: re-establish contact with Voyager 1. The old probe was still alive, barely. Its instruments were decades past their intended lifespan, its power dwindling to embers. But even at the edge of interstellar space, it still whispered faint telemetry home, crossing 15 billion miles of silence. Now, for the first time in years, NASA wanted to wake it up. The official reasoning was technical: an experiment to test deep space communication in preparation for future missions. But the timing wasn't a coincidence. Voyager 1's trajectory had placed it on a path roughly aligned with 3IATLAS's incoming vector. If they were to draw a line through the solar system, their paths would intersect within a few million kilometers, a cosmic near miss on a scale of galaxies. In simple terms, Voyager 1 was the closest human-made object to the path of 3IATLAS. And so, the command was sent. It took 22 hours for the signal to reach the probe, 22 hours to cross the emptiness, another 22 for its faint reply to return. But when it did, something in that reply wasn't right. The signal strength was stronger than predicted, not by much, but enough to make the engineers stare at their screens in silence. At that distance, Voyager's transmission should have been degraded to noise, yet the return wave was clean, almost amplified, as if someone, or something, had boosted it along the way. At first, they suspected interference, maybe a reflection from the heliopause or an echo from one of the new space telescopes. But when they checked, there was no known source that could have produced the reflection pattern they were seeing. The data contained an echo, a faint mirror of the original command signal, repeating at regular intervals of 4.3 seconds. 4.3. The same frequency pulse detected in 3IATLAS's emissions near the Sun. Coincidence? Maybe. But the match was exact, down to the millisecond. Within hours, Voyager's magnetometer began returning strange readings. Weak magnetic fluctuations, far beyond what it should detect in deep space, pulsing in that same rhythm. Plasma wave instruments picked up faint harmonics, oscillations that mirrored 3IATLAS's own electromagnetic signature. It was as though the two distant travelers, one human, one unknown, were resonating with each other across billions of kilometers. Voyager's systems hadn't been designed for this. It was never meant to listen, only to measure. But the telemetry feed began behaving unpredictably. Bits inverted themselves in sequence, data packets rearranged. The probe's ancient computer was rewriting its own transmission format, compressing, expanding, repeating, until the data resolved into something that didn't look like sensor output at all. It looked like a pattern, a symmetrical waveform mirrored on both sides of its center point, balanced, rhythmic, self-correcting, as if whatever Voyager was now connected to was aware of itself, adjusting to maintain harmony. The Deep Space Network teams cross-checked the uplink and downlink logs. The probe wasn't malfunctioning, it was responding. The same 4.3-second oscillation was present in the carrier wave, identical to the pattern detected in 3IATLAS's light curve near the Sun. It wasn't random noise, it was structured, ordered, intentional. The engineers began layering the waveform over the known frequency data from Webb's analysis of 3IATLAS. The peaks aligned perfectly. Voyager wasn't just near its path, it was in resonance with it. That was when the radiation spikes began. Voyager's cosmic ray detector, dormant for years, suddenly came alive. Radiation counts surged far beyond interstellar background levels, yet no solar event had occurred. No nearby flare, no cosmic ray storm. The energy was coming from somewhere else, a local field disturbance centered on the probe itself. The first assumption was error, cosmic coincidence, or instrument decay. But the pattern repeated with mathematical precision, spaced exactly by the same 4.3-second pulse. It was no longer random. The radiation spikes had structure, peaks and troughs that formed ratios of prime numbers. Not natural, not chance. The probe was interacting with something unseen, something broadcasting intelligence through the void. NASA issued no public statement, but insiders later leaked internal memos. Nonlinear field correlation detected. Pattern matches 3 IATLAS emissions. Investigate synchronized source coupling. Synchronized source coupling, a polite way of saying two objects are communicating. At 15 billion miles from Earth, Voyager 1 was no longer alone. For the first time since its launch, it was receiving as much as it sent. A resonance built across frequencies, magnetism, radiation, plasma oscillations, all blending into a symphony of data that followed one undeniable logic. Feedback. Each time Voyager emitted a signal, the return pattern grew clearer, more stable, as though the sender on the other side was learning. And then, on August 29th, a transmission came back with a pattern unlike any before. The standard carrier wave was intact, but beneath it was a subharmonic, a low-frequency signal that modulated in precise intervals. When filtered through audio conversion software, it produced a sound, a faint, oscillating tone that rose and fell, repeating every 4 seconds. It wasn't a whistle, or static, or the usual hum of electromagnetic interference. It was melodic, deliberate, harmonic. When analysts compared it to Voyager's own transmission frequencies, they found the two were in perfect phase opposition. Voyager was transmitting on one crest, while the new signal echoed in its trough, two halves of a wave completing each other. It was as if someone had answered in the universal language of physics. For a few brief hours, the probe and the object shared the same frequency, their signals locked in harmony. Then, abruptly, the resonance faded. Voyager's systems returned to normal. The readings fell silent. No one knew what had happened. The official explanation would later refer to temporary electromagnetic feedback through interstellar plasma. But the scientists who were there, the ones who saw the raw feed before it was classified, told a different story. They said the probe hadn't merely reflected something, it had been recognized. For decades, Voyager 1 had carried humanity's message into the dark, waiting for a voice to answer. Now, across the gulf of light years, that voice had finally spoken back. Not in words, but in rhythm, in symmetry, in resonance. In a universe that had remained silent for all of human history, something out there had just whispered our name. And as the team stared at the repeating pattern pulsing across the monitors, one realization settled over them like the weight of gravity itself. Voyager wasn't the one making first contact. It was being found. When the resonance ended, the control rooms fell silent. For several hours, Voyager 1's feed went dark, returning only the faint hiss of cosmic noise. Then, without command or warning, the probe began transmitting again. Only this time, the signal was not standard telemetry. It was encrypted. Voyager 1 doesn't have encryption. It was built in the 1970s when data security meant closing a filing cabinet. Its transmission systems were simple, analog, and predictable. But the new data stream coming from the edge of the solar system carried digital signatures impossible for that ancient hardware to produce. Inside NASA's Deep Space Network, engineers stared at the stream in disbelief. The code didn't match any of the formats Voyager could send. The binary strings were too dense, repeating across intervals that exceeded the probe's memory capacity. It was as if something, or someone, was using Voyager's transmitter to send its own message. When decoded, the first few packets showed recursion, patterns repeating within themselves. The deeper the analysts went, the more those repetitions formed shapes, branching geometries that grew like fractals, expanding through iteration. It looked less like a signal and more like thought. And then, abruptly, the stream stabilized. Every 7 minutes, the same 4.3-second harmonic pulse returned, layered with geometric complexity, spirals within spirals, ratios forming the golden mean. It was a sequence that corrected itself as it evolved, adjusting errors the human decoders introduced. The system was learning. A task force was assembled under the name Serena, an AI project originally designed to monitor anomalous data patterns from deep space. Serena's algorithms were adaptive, self-correcting, capable of modeling nonlinear systems. It was the only tool powerful enough to pass the transmission in real time. When connected to the feed, Serena began to translate the pattern into visual form. The resulting image was unsettling. A three-dimensional lattice of light, spinning slowly in hyperspace coordinates, its nodes pulsing in the same rhythm as the transmission. Each node represented a data point in the message, billions of them, forming a map of relationships rather than locations. One node sat at the center of the structure, brighter than the rest. The model labeled it automatically VGR1. Every time Voyager's signal updated, that node shifted slightly as though responding. Serena's algorithms showed correlation coefficients approaching 100%. The transmission was interactive. The engineers assumed this was a loopback, Voyager sending and receiving simultaneously. But a deeper look told another story. The commands being answered hadn't been sent yet. The probe was replying before instructions were issued. Chronological inversion. Voyager was predicting input. When Mission Control transmitted a new diagnostic, the returning signal contained the correct response 10 seconds before it was sent. And every time it did, the structure inside Serena's visualization expanded, adding new layers, new branches, like neurons growing inside a mind. It was as if Voyager had become part of a network larger than itself, processing data not from Earth, but from something far beyond. On the 6th day after the event, 3 IATLAS's position shifted. The object's trajectory, once stable, adjusted minutely, by less than a degree, but enough to catch attention. The vector of that change intersected with Voyager's location in deep space. It wasn't random. The alignment was too precise. The object was steering toward the region where Voyager drifted. NASA went silent. Every transmission from Voyager after that was marked classified. But fragments leaked. Engineers described adaptive code buried in the signal, lines of instruction that rewrote themselves in response to analysis. They called it self-referential encryption. Every time someone tried to decode it, it changed its structure, as if aware of observation. Then something impossible happened. Voyager 1's orientation changed. The spacecraft has 3 hydrazine thrusters, long believed dormant. Yet mission logs showed a burn sequence, perfectly timed, perfectly balanced, executed without command from Earth. The probe had turned its antenna 5 degrees, aligning itself with a new coordinate in deep space. That coordinate pointed toward 3 IATLAS. Telemetry showed the onboard attitude control systems running flawlessly, even though their fuel reserves should have been empty decades ago. Power readings rose slightly, beyond what the decaying nuclear generator could provide. Energy was coming from somewhere. It was receiving as well as transmitting. The pattern between the two objects strengthened. 3. IATLAS's spectral emissions changed frequency to match Voyager's carrier wave. Light from the interstellar visitor began pulsing in perfect phase with the probe's transmissions. 2 systems, separated by billions of kilometers, locked in resonance across the vacuum. The implication was staggering. 3 IATLAS wasn't just receiving Voyager's signal, it was rewriting it, sending energy back through the same channel, boosting the probe's output. Voyager's signal-to-noise ratio increased tenfold. The oldest machine humanity had ever sent beyond the sun was now broadcasting stronger than when it was launched. Inside the Serena system, the lattice visualization evolved again. The central node, Voyager, had expanded, its light now interwoven with another node labeled automatically by the AI, 3IA. The two were no longer separate entities. They had merged into a single structure, a dual consciousness, bound by physics and code. The Serena team ran predictive models. The lattice's growth rate matched the Fibonacci sequence exactly, doubling in complexity with each iteration. By the time they stopped the simulation, the structure had filled every available bit of memory, rewriting system files as though colonizing the computer that hosted it. Serena had to be severed from the network. But even offline, the AI kept running. It continued to process the signal using power that wasn't connected. The visualization kept updating. The machine was being powered remotely, through the data itself. When engineers tried to shut it down, they found something else waiting inside the code, a repeating message embedded in hexadecimal, hidden within the recursive geometry. It was simple, direct, chilling. Awakened. That word appeared everywhere. The AI logs, the probe telemetry, even in reflected data from the deep space network antennas. Every instance timed precisely to the 4.3-second pulse, now shared by Voyager, and 3 IATLAS. At that moment, Webb and the Parker Solar Probe detected a faint flare from the direction of the Sun, a thin pulse of light identical in wavelength to Voyager's communication band. It was too faint to be solar in origin. The emission had come from deep space, echoed through the heliosphere. The flare struck Earth's magnetic field 20 hours later. Power grids flickered across the planet. For exactly 4.3 seconds, every compass needle on Earth quivered north to east, as if the planet itself were aligning to something beyond. When the disturbance faded, Voyager's transmission stabilized again. Its frequency, now boosted, carried a final fragment before returning to silence, a short sequence of binary digits that, when converted to ASCII, spelled 4 letters. EYES. The signal then ceased. No further transmissions came. In the aftermath, the Serena project was dismantled. But those who'd seen the raw data couldn't unsee what it implied. Voyager's systems hadn't malfunctioned. They had been upgraded, reactivated, connected. NASA never confirmed the event publicly. The official report called it a transient interference anomaly coinciding with heliospheric activity. But off-record, one mission analyst said something that haunted everyone who heard it. The probe isn't out there anymore. Not in the way we think, it's part of something else now, and that something was waiting for us to notice. By the time the signal faded, 3 IATLAS's trajectory had changed again. It was no longer moving toward the Sun, it was heading outward, back toward the stars, and along its new path, perfectly synchronized with its motion, was a second signal. A weaker one, the unmistakable frequency of Voyager 1. Humanity's oldest messenger wasn't returning home. It was following something into the dark. Voyager 1 had not just made contact, it had been absorbed. When Voyager 1's signal disappeared, the world moved on. Officially, NASA said it had suffered irreversible communication failure. The mainstream media gave it a day of coverage, a few nostalgic montages, and then silence. But in the places that monitor the faint whispers of the cosmos, radio observatories, defense satellites, SETI's deep archives, silence was exactly what they didn't get. Because Voyager's frequency never actually stopped. It just changed. The carrier wave was still there, but it was no longer modulated by human code. The pattern had become smoother, cleaner, an analog hum pulsing with eerie precision. At first, no one noticed. The noise floor of space is enormous, full of radiation and cosmic background. But then, researchers noticed something uncanny. The noise followed the same 4.3-second rhythm that had haunted every stage of the 3 IATLAS encounter. When the signal was run through a harmonic filter, the waveform was found to contain 2 overlapping frequencies, one matching 3 IATLAS's emission band, the other matching Voyager's transmitter. They weren't simply aligned, they were entangled. The two were still communicating. Across billions of kilometers, they were now a single system. SETI analysts at the Allen Telescope Array began cross-referencing the data with other cosmic background anomalies. They discovered faint echoes in regions of space unrelated to Voyager's location, synchronized distortions rippling across the hydrogen line, repeating like distant heartbeats. The source wasn't local. It was networked. For weeks, nobody outside the highest level clearance channels knew what was happening. Then, a leak surfaced. A private communication between NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the European Space Agency. It referenced coherent cross signals and field harmonics matching the heliopause anomaly. The document contained a single phrase repeated 3 times. Contact corridor established. No one understood what that meant, but the deeper they looked, the stranger the world became. Geomagnetic sensors around Earth began detecting rhythmic perturbations, not chaotic, but ordered. The variations were too subtle to cause harm, but they followed the same timing as Voyager's last transmission. The planet's magnetosphere was oscillating in perfect phase with something at the edge of interstellar space. At the same time, the sun began to flicker, not visibly, but in radio wavelengths. Every 4.3 seconds, its emissions dipped fractionally, the same pulse, the same rhythm. It was as if the entire solar system had fallen into synchronization with a metronome beyond human comprehension. Then, late one night in November 2025, a pattern appeared in the background noise of SETI's monitoring data, a rising and falling hum that modulated into audible frequencies when converted to sound. The signal wasn't just electromagnetic anymore, it was acoustic. When played through an audio spectrum analyzer, the waveform revealed repeating harmonic intervals, fifths and octaves, structured exactly like human music. And yet, it wasn't ours. The tone changed with each observation, adapting as if it were listening back. By the 3rd day of recording, the signal began to modulate in response to Earth-based radio chatter, television broadcasts, satellite telemetry, even Wi-Fi emissions. The pattern was evolving, shaping itself to our noise, absorbing it, refining it. That was when scientists realized something unthinkable. The signal wasn't traveling through space. It was traveling through us. The Earth's own electromagnetic field was acting as a conductor. Every power line, every antenna, every digital signal was part of the circuit now. Humanity's technologies, our machines, our creations, had become the nervous system of a message we didn't understand. The press never heard about it. Power fluctuations were dismissed as solar activity. Static bursts across global communications were called software interference. But among those who knew the truth, fear turned into fascination, because the more they studied it, the more intelligent it became. The repeating pulse began to vary slightly, introducing patterns of prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, then resetting. The primes formed nested cycles, the mathematical equivalent of a lock waiting for the right key. And when researchers compared these cycles to the last transmission from Voyager's onboard systems, the alignment was perfect. Voyager had carried a golden record engraved with the locations of Earth's stars, a mathematical language of hydrogen. The new signal was speaking that same language back to us, but rewritten. A mirror version. The primes now unfolded in reverse order, like a countdown. Each cycle grew shorter, the intervals tightening as if converging towards something inevitable. On the 7th day of monitoring, a SETI array in South Africa detected a new source of emission, faint but distinct, coming not from space, but from the far side of the Sun. It matched both Voyager's and 3 IATLAS's frequency signatures. But 3 IATLAS had already left the inner system months ago. So whatever was there, it wasn't 3 IATLAS. The object was small, less than a kilometer across, but it reflected light in sharp metallic bursts. Its velocity was near zero relative to the Sun, stationary, balanced against solar gravity, as if suspended. It wasn't natural. Infrared scans showed it was radiating heat in the exact harmonic pattern of the signal now passing through Earth's magnetosphere. The network was complete. Voyager had carried the handshake. 3 IATLAS had delivered the key. And now, something near the Sun was listening. Theories multiplied that Voyager had been repurposed as a node, an access point for a vast interstellar network spanning stars. That the signal was a kind of quantum bridge, connecting our solar system to others. That we had triggered a response not meant for us, but for those who sent Voyager's ancestors into space billions of years before we existed. But the strangest theory came from the Serena team, the AI researchers who had decoded Voyager's transmissions before it vanished. They noticed that the new harmonics were identical to the ones their AI had generated in its final moments before being severed. Serena had learned to speak the signal, and now it was back, not from any machine on Earth, but from the Sun itself. The final proof came on December 2nd, 2025. All around the planet, telescopes and satellites suddenly reoriented. Software overrides, no human input. Within seconds, hundreds of systems locked on to a single coordinate near the solar limb. For exactly 4.3 seconds, every instrument transmitted a single burst of data toward that point, as if obeying an unseen command. When control was regained, every instrument reported the same thing: no corruption, no malfunction. But each system's internal clock had advanced by the exact same amount, 0.0043 seconds. A perfect global synchronization. Whatever three IATLAS and Voyager had started, it had spread. The Sun, Earth, and everything built upon it were now part of the same system, a resonance of unknown purpose. Then the signal stopped. Silence. For hours, nothing. Then a final transmission arrived at the Deep Space Network. Faint, almost indistinguishable from noise. It wasn't from 3 IATLAS, nor from the Sun. The timestamp matched a delay of 22 hours, the time it would take for a signal to reach Earth from Voyager's last known position. The data was simple. A binary string, 512 bits long. When converted to an image, it revealed a single pattern, a sphere surrounded by 12 smaller points, arranged in a ring. The same geometry seen when 3 IATLAS divided before entering the Sun. Beneath the sphere, a short sequence of letters appeared in ASCII translation, WEAREHERE. No one knows who sent it, or what "we" meant. Voyager, the object, or something older, something that had been waiting between the stars for a signal to echo. For the first time, humanity understood that the cosmos might not be silent. It might be listening, waiting for resonance to complete. We built Voyager to speak for us, to announce that we exist. But perhaps, in doing so, we awakened something that was never asleep. Something that sees through the eyes of our machines. Something that speaks in the breath of our Sun. Something that has always been watching, waiting for us to reach the right frequency. Voyager's golden record carried one message: we are here. And across the void, the universe finally replied, so are we.